The dog had pinned the boy against the couch cushion 3 times in 1 hour. By the 4th, Marcy had already picked up her phone. She put it down, then picked it up again. Marcy Ellingsworth had been a school nurse for 22 years. She had cleaned wounds, called ambulances, spotted meningitis in a child whose parents thought he had the flu. She knew what animal aggression looked like. She had attended 2 mandatory seminars on exactly that subject. She knew the signs. And what Rook was doing, pressing his 54-pound body against 5-year-old Owen's chest and refusing to move, looked like every one of them. Rook was a 3-year-old border collie. He had never so much as growled at Owen. Not once. Owen had sat on him, pulled his ears, attempted to ride him like a small horse during a birthday party last spring. Rook had accepted all of it with the patience of a creature that had decided, somewhere in his first week home, that this particular child was his entire job, which is why Thursday evening made no sense. Owen had come home from kindergarten tired. He ate half a cheese sandwich and said his stomach hurt. Marcy checked his temperature, 99.1, took a mental note, and told him he could watch 1 show before bed. He was on the couch, cartoon playing, by 6 o'clock. Rook had settled beside him the way he always did, chin on the armrest, 1 ear tracking the room. Then something changed. Marcy was washing dishes when she heard Owen say, "Stop," in the flat, confused way children use when they don't understand what's happening. She came to the doorway and saw Rook standing over Owen, both front paws on the couch cushion on either side of the boy's hips, his face inches from Owen's face. She said Rook's name. He didn't look at her. She said it again. He turned his head toward her for 1 second, then turned immediately back to Owen. She crossed the room and put her hand on Rook's collar. He didn't resist being pulled back, but the moment she released him, he returned. Not to Owen's side, to directly in front of him, muzzle lowered, close enough that Owen leaned back into the cushion. Marcy stood there for a moment, watching. The television was still on. Owen looked uncomfortable but not afraid. He looked like a child trying to watch a cartoon with a large dog in the way. She sat on the coffee table and looked at Rook. His eyes were not wide. His ears were not flat. His body was not stiff the way she had been taught a threatened dog holds itself. He was breathing steadily. His tail was down, but not tucked. He looked, she would say later, like a dog doing a job he could not explain. She asked Owen how he felt. He said fine. She pressed the back of her hand to his forehead. Still warm. She checked his temperature again. 99.3. By the time she got Owen to brush his teeth, Rook had followed them down the hall and positioned himself in Owen's doorway. He didn't enter the room. He lay at the threshold, chin on his paws, eyes tracking Owen's movements. If you stay for stories about animals who sense what we cannot, you're in the right place. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Marcy sat in the rocking chair in Owen's room until he fell asleep. Rook did not move from the doorway. She thought, he's being protective of a tired child. She thought, he's picking up on my own low-level concern. She had read enough veterinary behavior articles to know that dogs mirror their owner's anxiety. This was almost certainly that. She went to bed at 10. Her husband, Craig, had texted that he was finishing a project at the office and would be home by 11. She woke at 12:14 to Rook's weight on her legs. He was standing on the bed, which he was not allowed to do, and he was looking toward the hall. He did not bark. He stepped over her legs to the edge of the bed and stood there. Marcy said his name. He looked at her, then looked at the hall. She got up. Owen's room was dark. She pushed the door open and stood in the shaft of hallway light. He was in bed, on his side, the blanket pulled up. She stood still and listened to his breathing. It was wrong. Not dramatically, not the labored sawing breath she knew from croup. Something quieter, a slight hesitation, a rhythm that paused where it shouldn't. She crossed the room and put her hand on his chest. His skin was damp. Not from fever sweat, she had felt that before, but a different kind. Clammy, the word her training had always attached to that particular sensation was perfusion. She picked up her phone and called 911. Craig arrived 12 minutes before the ambulance did. He found Marcy on the floor beside Owen's bed, with her fingers on the boy's wrist, counting. Rook was pressed against the far wall of the room. Still watching, the paramedics used the word lethargic 3 times in the first 90 seconds. The number they gave her in the ambulance was 38. Blood glucose, 38 milligrams per deciliter. The attending physician at the pediatric emergency department was Drive Anita Ramirez. She had been practicing for 16 years. She sat with Marcy and Craig in a small room off the main ward and explained, slowly, what they had missed. Owen had almost certainly been showing early symptoms of type 1 diabetes for several weeks. The fatigue, the decreased appetite, the mild fevers that weren't quite fevers. His blood sugar had been dropping over the course of Thursday evening. At 38, he was at the threshold of diabetic hypoglycemic unconsciousness. She said the words Marcy would carry for a long time. If his glucose had dropped another 8 to 10 points before anyone checked on him, we would be talking about a very different kind of morning. Has your dog ever behaved in a way you couldn't explain until it was the only explanation that made sense? Tell us in the comments. These stories deserve to be heard. Marcy sat with that in the bright quiet of the hospital room while Owen slept with the glucose monitor taped to his arm and an IV line running into his hand. Craig had gone to get coffee. Rook was at home, presumably still stationed in Owen's doorway, guarding an empty room. She thought about what she had almost done. She had almost crated him. She had gotten as far as opening the crate door before deciding to wait and see. She was a school nurse. She knew animal behavior well enough to recognize what looked like escalating territorial guarding around a child. She had been wrong about precisely none of that. She had also been wrong about what it meant. Rook, pressing his face to Owen's at 6 o'clock. Not challenge, scent detection. The acetone compound that builds in the breath when blood glucose drops to dangerous levels. Dogs can smell it at concentrations that register as nothing to human senses. Rook following Owen to his room, not guarding territory, tracking a child whose chemistry was shifting in a direction he didn't have language for, but understood completely. Rook on the bed, at 12:14. Not misbehaving. The only alarm in the house that was still working. Every guardian deserves to be recognized, even the ones who never asked for anything in return. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe so you never miss the next one. Owen was home by Saturday afternoon. He came through the front door, and Rook met him in the entryway and pressed his nose to Owen's knee and stood very still for a moment, the way he did when he was reading something. Owen put his hand on Rook's head. Marcy watched from the hallway. She didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say that the dog hadn't already said, in the only language she had. On a Thursday night, when it mattered most, he went back to his usual place, Owen's left side, chin on the armrest, one ear tracking the room. The next story involves a cat who changed her behavior for 11 days before a diagnosis that changed everything. You won't want to miss it.